Hi friends, Evelina here. Welcome to the Homecomings Podcast, an Audible initiative sharing vulnerable conversations with purpose-driven creatives on their life journeys, all with the intention to inspire people listening to discover the meaning of home in their own lives and come deeper back to their truest versions of self. We use home as a metaphor to represent all that beckons comfort, familiarity, and belonging for your unique life journey. Whether that's through the work that you do, the people you surround yourself with, or the things that bring you the most joy in life. Because to live a life with more home means to live a more mindful and beautiful life. And isn't that the greatest intention for us all? I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. Hello, friends. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of the Homecomings Podcast. I'm your host, Evelina Olachowska, brand strategist and designer. And today I'm so excited to welcome my guest on the show today, Jordan Hutchison. Jordan and I connected, I want to say early last year or tail end of 2022 in a beautiful community led by our mutual former coach, Sam Altieri, who, if you tune into the podcast in season 1, I believe she was episode 5 or 6. That conversation with Sam was fantastic. But I connected with Jordan in Sam's community circle and just loved her energy and spirit from the get-go. And I always love and admire connections with other humans who are on the same path. Of course, there's a relatability. There's a just deeper connectivity when you can connect with someone who is venturing into or on similar journeys. And this journey in particular that I'm speaking to is the journey of entrepreneurship, leading a business, doing this thing solo, what it's like, the ins and outs, all of that. So there was a beautiful mutual connectivity, I will say, between Jordan and I. But besides that, I just have always loved and appreciated her energy and her spirit, especially through the vehicle that she lives out her purpose. So to give a little background on Jordan, Jordan is a boudoir photographer, a feminine empowerment coach, and the host of the BodyShift Podcast. And I had the pleasure of actually being on her show. I believe it was like a couple weeks or so before we had recorded this episode at the tail end of last year. So I'll link that conversation in the show notes below for anyone curious to tune in. Jordan asks really beautiful questions and just dove deeper into my story and my journey on my business and all the things that light me up. And yeah, it was a great conversation. So I'll plug that in the show notes. But in today's episode, Jordan and I talk all things, yes, business, but so much too centered around this whole idea of embodiment. What is embodiment? What is empowerment? What that all looks like, how she specifically works with her clients, helps them to connect to their bodies, embrace who they are, connect to that inherent confidence and energy that I feel like for most women today has been suppressed for so long, given the wild societal expectations and norms and standards and all that jazz. So we dive into Jordan's story on this episode. She shares how she got into boudoir specifically, what her journey has been like starting her business, and how she was able to really tap in and connect with what specifically lit her up related to photography. Because when people think photography, at least for me, I think like, oh, it's photography. It's like a very specific thing. You're working with a camera. But then, as with every profession, it's like, okay, well, what's your, we could say, niche or avenue? You could do so many things in photography. And so what drew Jordan specifically to boudoir is really fascinating and beautiful. And I think something that I really took away and appreciated from the conversation was touching on, not only is she doing this photography, but she's also embraced coaching in the process. And, when I think about myself, and I think a lot of people who I connect with and have conversations with, it's this whole idea of being multi-passionate, the multi-slashy, we could say. You have so many interests. You're like, what do I possibly focus my energy and attention on? And I think the explanation that Jordan gives towards the tail end of this conversation around all of these avenues being interconnected with a similar purpose was so deeply, I don't know, like clarifying and comforting for me to hear, because that is exactly how I feel with the work that I do. I have this podcast. I do brand strategy and design with my clients. But then on the side, I do my art. And then I have my blog and I love writing. And it's like, okay, what I'm doing all these things, they kind of feel like, they're all over the place. But what is the ultimate purpose or connector between all of them? And I've really sat with this and refined this over the last really 4 or 5 years along my journey of like, what drives me? Like, what is the core why behind what I do? And this is what I also love doing so much with my clients, because as random as all these different interests or avenues could seem to someone, deep down, there is a common thread. And I love uncovering that thread for people. So when Jordan shared this piece from her journey and her purpose and like the real driver that is the connector between all that she does, whether it's her podcast, whether it's her photography, whether it's her coaching, it's all interconnected with this intention of uplifting, supporting women, empowering them, helping them connect more with their bodies, with their inherent power in themselves. And so I loved that so deeply. So I'm really excited to bring this one to you guys. I feel like there's so many incredible takeaways hearing someone embark on the journey of entrepreneurship and connect to ultimately really what lights them up, because this path it has its ups and downs. Absolutely. There's the lows and the highs. And time again, I work with this with my clients. I love speaking about this. I love reminding myself about this. It's these moments, especially in the lows that feel really low, where we could come back to our purpose, come back to that core why of like, what the heck, like, why the heck are we doing this? Like, what is the real motivator behind it all? That's when the clouds clear, I guess, or they start to part a little bit of like, okay, this is what makes sense. So there's so much of that energy in this conversation. I think you guys are going to really love Jordan and her energy. If you want to work with her, if you want to check out her incredible work, definitely give her a follow on Instagram. I'm going to link all of her handles in the show notes. Show her some love. She's so incredible. Without further ado, guys, here is my conversation with the incredible Jordan Hutchison.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I had my chai. I kind of meditated a little bit. I had some nerves. I haven't done
Yeah.
it. I'm so used to being the one interviewing. So, I haven't been interviewed in a while, so I'm excited.
Oh,
They're good
good
nerves.
nerves, yes. And I love the it's I can imagine, there may be some nerves, but on the other end of that, excitement also.
Mm.
So we're gonna lean into the excitement for this, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be easygoing, flowy conversation. So it's gonna absolutely flow.
I love it. Let's do
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so I've been liking to kick off my recent chats with a little bit of an icebreaker question for my
it.
guests. And that is, what is currently lighting you up right now in your life?
Mm.
You can say this past month for context.
Honestly, my own podcast, which you
Mm.
were obviously a guest on, our episode dropped yesterday.
Yay!
Exciting. It is just something that, it brings no monetary value yet, hopefully, but it's just a great outlet for me to express my thoughts in a more, I feel, intimate way than Instagram. And I can have more meaningful, impactful conversations, especially with my guests who I have on. And I've been interviewing these women who are just so powerful and so magnetic, like yourself. And we just have these beautiful conversations. And next thing we know, it's an hour and a half later. We're just like, whoa,
Yeah.
okay, we gotta wrap this up. But we can
Yes.
talk forever. And I love that it's just so open and so raw and so intimate.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I can absolutely echo all of that. I actually released my final episode for season 1 yesterday. Was yesterday Tuesday? Yeah. And it's so wild because I was reflecting yesterday on like, oh, it's been such a ride, and just sitting in deep gratitude for embracing on this journey and being surprised in so many different ways. Actually, on that point, I'm curious, like, what the journey has been like for you having started that podcast, because I can speak, on my end around the fears and apprehensions and hesitations. Like you mentioned the fulfillment and the enjoyment out of that, but has there been anything else that surprised you from venturing down that path?
Mm. Um, the reaction from others
Mm,
has been so profound, particularly my grandma.
wow.
Yeah, she's like my biggest supporter, and I have a whole episode about healing your inner child. And my grandma had, I mean, I have an episode also on dealing with grief, and I talk about my grandma's story on there, but um she's been through a lot in her life. And when I released that episode on healing your inner child, she messaged me and said that she was crying happy tears because I
Oh,
helped her remember that her childhood wasn't all bad. And I helped her remember the good parts. And I
oh,
like started sobbing. I'm getting teary-eyed
oh.
saying it now because it's just the impact that it's had on the people that have listened to it. And I love that I was able to provide some of that for her. And I just think it's such a gift.
That's so amazing. And I think out of all people too, to know that it's someone so close and near and dear to you, and to know that you're affecting their lives in a really unexpected way. Cause I'm sure you weren't thinking like, this is going to reach my grandma and like touch her in this way, that's so beautiful.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's wild that you say that too. I was just thinking about some of the reactions as well from my end. I had someone who I went to high school with, who I barely communicated with. Like this was just a guy who like I'd see here and there. We were actually like in the band together. And he had DM'd me mentioning that he had listened to my first episode and he was so excited for the rest of the season and that it was so great and all this stuff. And I literally was almost brought to tears because I haven't spoken to him in years. And, it took me a moment to like remember who he was. And I'm like, wow, this person that, I haven't thought about in years is
Mm-hmm.
tuning in, and in some unexpected way what I am saying is affecting him, and hopefully in whatever capacity making an impact. And that for me silenced my fears, because when I launched, I was so nervous. I'm like, who's going to care? This is like so vulnerable. But getting that little reassurance, it was like, oh, okay, if I know that just like one person was affected, then okay, I'm going to keep going. And I don't know what that feeling like was for you, but I imagine it was probably to similar caliber. I think especially because it was your grandma, who's such a sweet, like near and dear person to you.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandma, I mean, my sister and I have a different relationship with our grandma from our cousins. Our grandma became our legal guardian when we were 16. And so there's just that motherly bond also with
Yeah.
her. And so it was just kind of this stamp of approval from her that I didn't need, but it definitely felt just really awesome and
Yeah.
amazing and just so nurturing and comforting.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, I want to do, before we dive any deeper down our rabbit holes, I want to take a step back and just do a little introduction on your end. If you wanted just to share, I call it like the Jordan elevator pitch, who you are and what you do. What is your vehicle for your purpose in the world?
Mm. I am Jordan Hutchison, and I help women remember their power because I'm not here to tell you that you're powerful or give you permission to be powerful. I'm here to just help you tap into that and lean into that, right? And I'm a boudoir photographer. I'm also a women's empowerment coach, just really helping women step into the phase of their life where they become their own inner muse and they stop looking outward for muse from other people, right?
That is so good. And the way that you like very succinctly stated that like helping women remember their own power is in itself so powerful. So I'm curious, how did you come to that mission, like that driver? Yeah, because it's, again, I think it's funny because my work, when I work with clients, is helping them position themselves for their brand oftentimes, right? And it's, you think about something like a mission statement or a vision statement, and it has to be this like succinct but powerful and all-encompassing thing that summarizes, essentially what you're doing and what your vision is in the world. And the way that you stated yours, it really hit home. It's like, whoa, okay. So how did you arrive to that point in crafting that?
Mm. It's because there was a point in my life where I didn't know that I was powerful. I didn't let
Mm,
myself believe that I was powerful, right? I was
mm,
too afraid of the unknown. I think is a big part, a big factor of that. When I was in my from oh, how old was I? 18 to 23, just shy of 5 years. I was in this relationship. We knew each other from high school. We were friends before we started dating, and long story short, he was cheating on me the entire time.
mm,
And I knew, but I could never prove it. And there was a lot of gaslighting and a lot of manipulation and a lot of lying. And I would even like confront the women who I was pretty positive and later confirmed that were involved. And they would take his side and aid in the manipulation and the gaslighting and
mm.
all of this. And um, I instinctually knew it, but I still stayed with him because I was too afraid to like I broke up with him a couple times, but then within a day we would get back together because I was too afraid to step out onto my own, right? And figure out what happens next. And I didn't realize my own power at that time. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of that plays into, my mom passed away when I was 16. And so there was also a trauma bond with this person because he was
Mm,
a huge rock for me during that time. And then while we were dating, his mom passed away. And so I think there were
wow.
just so many layers and also excuses that I told myself of like reasons why I need to stay and reasons why, we're going to work through this and we're going to get past it. And then um, one day I just had enough and I walked away and things didn't really change for me post that. If anything, I say this term a lot. I then began free falling through my 20s.
Mm,
And I had a great time, don't get me wrong, but I was running from everything. I had trust issues, I had commitment issues, I had sister wounds, I didn't trust women. There were all of these things that I didn't allow myself to really work on because I wasn't ready yet. There was so much trauma that I needed to work through. Um, and so, I did a lot of partying, did a lot of drugs, just, free falling through my 20s. And when I was 27, I during this time I also went to school for photography. I have an associate's degree. I went to a tech school in Minneapolis and I graduated and I didn't touch my camera for 2 years because I was just so uninspired and people would say, "Oh, Jordan, you're a photographer." And I would say, "Yeah." And I felt like the biggest hypocrite. I felt like an imposter saying that because I
mm,
was doing nothing to move that needle forward, right? I hadn't touched my camera in 2 years. And so that identity seemed very far fetched and so far removed from me at that time. And when I was 27, my roommate slash best friend and I were in Thailand and our lease was coming to an end. She was talking about moving to a different city. And that's when it kind of hit me of like, what the fuck are you doing?
mm,
Like it was we were sitting on a beach in Krabi, Thailand, watching the sunrise. It was also the, at that point, I think it was the 10-year anniversary of my mom's passing.
wow.
So we were sobbing. We were just having this very emotional conversation. And it clicked for me of like, you need to do something to get out of this cycle that you're in right now because nothing is working for you and you are so depressed. You're hiding behind the partying and the drugs and these people that you shouldn't be hanging out with. And so that's when I was like, well, let's move to Denver.
Mm,
um, and so I moved to Denver and I started working for a they're like a third party wedding photography company. So basically they handle all the bookings. I just get told when to show up, where to show up, how much I'm making, whatever. And so I did that for about 2 years and I hated it. And I had done a couple weddings in Minnesota. Altogether, I did weddings for about 4 years and I just never felt passionate about it. I never felt connected to it. And the wedding industry is an easy stepping stone for photographers who don't really know what they want to do, right? It's just, it's a great way to get bookings and make money and all of that. But wasn't sustainable for me. It wasn't sustaining. It wasn't impactful. Like, I wanted more connection with my clients. And I kept hearing about boudoir, but I had never really given it a thought. And so it was fall of 2019. I said, okay, this is going to be my last wedding. Like, we're going to step out of this. And then 2020 happened and the world stopped turning for a while. And so it was
Yeah.
segue into boudoir. And it was like, from the moment the first session, it was so phenomenal for me. At the time, I was also moving through an eating disorder. And so boudoir helped me heal myself because it showed me the strength that I knew that I had, but it just kind of helped me unlock that because I saw these women showing up and being so raw and being so vulnerable and just loving every part of themselves. And so that helped me, stop doing that to myself. And here we are 3 years later, and I love what I do so much. And boudoir is just such a great way to showcase the female form, right, in all its beauty. And so magnetic and just infectious, right? But it's also a great way to just showcase the female strength and women's strength. And I'm creating this web of women who I'm weaving this web of women who are just so strong within themselves and they believe in themselves. And it's because of my love for boudoir and everything that's come from it that I'm now doing women's coaching. Because for me, boudoir is amazing, but it's only a 4-hour experience. So like I found myself asking, well, what comes next? Because it's almost like this high, right? This rush where you come and you get pampered and I pose your body to look all of these amazing ways and just like, then what?
Yeah.
And then you kind of crash after that. And so that's what prompted me to go into coaching and just explore this avenue because I want to create more sustainable healing. I want to create more sustainable love and appreciation for ourselves outside of the boudoir experience. And so, yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Yeah. No, that was amazing. And I'm always so fascinated by origin stories of
Yeah.
how someone gets from point A to B. And I especially love asking the question for coaches and people who are in mentorship opportunities because I find, and having been, into coaching myself, especially the last several years, I found that to do something like coaching, and I think this could apply to a lot of service based industries, but in particular, coaching when you're working with people in such a vulnerable state, and it's this process of deep transformation, there is more often than not such a powerful driver that's driving someone to do something like coaching. Because I think it's one of those industries or professions that like you can't really hide like you because you have to be so open and vulnerable with the person, and you're also witnessing like I don't know, the most purest potent like transformation from someone and guiding them through that. And so I found that at least in my experience, the coaches I've worked with always come from these powerful stories of like being in the most rock bottom lows but then finding something that inspired them to transform their lives. And I think I've quoted this book several times on the show, but when I picked this up, it was one of those books that like left a really big impression on me. It's called The Values Factor by Dr. DeMartini. Basically what it is it helps you identify your values, like what's most important in your life. But the interesting point that he makes is there's these things in our lives that we call voids. And oftentimes we are kind of looking at these things from like a victim mentality of like, the lows that we've endured. But a lot of times our values come from those lows. So, as an example, like for me, my top value is freedom. And when I reflect and I look back, it's like, oh, I value freedom so much because, I had strict parents growing up and I always wanted to do so much. And it sounds like through your journey, you were able to take your voids that you've endured in your life and really turn them not only into your values, but leverage them for your purpose and the work that you do in the world, which is so amazing and so inspiring. I wanted to ask you, as you were sharing about you photographing weddings and now you doing boudoir, and that's such a different just fulfillment and sensation. I'm curious how you knew, and you spoke a little bit about this, but if you could go into more detail on like the feelings in your body that you were having, like shooting weddings. Like, how did you know it wasn't for you? And especially, I think like now that you're doing boudoir and you're feeling that like sense of fulfillment, when you got connected to it, how did you know that it was it? Like, are there any tangible ways that you could describe that, like that knowing of like, oh, okay, this is it?
Yeah, I dreaded going to weddings. I I didn't look forward to it. I was never
Yeah.
excited about it. I was like, of
Mhm.
course, some of the sceneries, because I live in Denver, the Rocky Mountains are right here. Some of the weddings were in the mountains. I would look forward to the scenery aspect of it, but the otherwise I wasn't excited. And that to me was a really big indicator, because this is such a joyous moment for these people, these
Mm.
couples, and
Yeah.
their photographer should be as excited about that.
Hmm.
And to me, I never found wedding photography to be very creative. That's not to say that it's not a creative field, because it is.
Hmm.
There are so many talented wedding photographers out there. I am just not the person that finds joy in that stuff, because it just I was just craving something a little bit deeper. And I didn't know what that was in that moment.
Yeah.
Um, and it took a while to find that. Even with the first couple shoots with Boudoir, I was like, "Oh, this
Mm.
is this is this is different," because I'm excited to hear these women's backstories. I'm excited to find out why they're coming to me today, and I'm excited to provide them an not opportunity, but provide them, some dedicated time for themselves to really remember their power and their strength, and be turned on by themselves, right? Because that's a big factor, is I want women to love who they are.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know fully what I was looking for, but I just knew that the weddings were not for me. And, especially those 250 plus people, I didn't like wrangling people for family photos. I found it to just be exhausting.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just knew that there was something more for me.
Hmm. Yeah, I asked the question because I was in a similar state as you. I had studied architecture in school, and when I got into actually working in the architecture field, I absolutely hated it. But I stuck in the industry for 2.5 years because for me, it was this narrative of like, I went to school for this, therefore I need to do this. And I come from a very more traditional background where the expectation is you go to school, you get an education, you get your degree, you get your job, and then you stay in that job. So there was this fear around like, oh, I can't do anything but architecture because like this is what I went to school for. And it was so hindering. And we talked about this actually on your episode when you had me on. It's this idea of like stepping into trying something new, and then that like, oh, this actually feels good, and then seeing that like, okay, I could do this. And so I love those moments because they feel like liberating moments, especially, I actually would be curious to know what your experience was in school and if that differed from you actually going into the field and doing it. Because I know in my experience, I loved architecture school, but being in the professional field, like it was so different because it was so creatively limiting. And to what you're sharing about weddings, it sounds like you couldn't flex your creativity as much as I imagine in school, correct?
Hmm. Yeah, and also in school, I had no end goal. I just knew
Mm,
that I liked
yes.
photography, and I knew that I wanted to learn more of it. Hindsight, did I need to go for an associate's degree in photography? Probably not. But I did learn, the benefit of school is there's hands-on training. I get to learn all of these software programs within Adobe, versus teaching myself. There's hands-on lighting equipment that I get to use. And so, um, I don't regret it, but hindsight, would I go back to school or self-teach? Probably self-teach, because I feel like I've taught myself more over the years just with experience, right? But while I was there, I had no end goal. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I didn't like product photography. I knew that I loved people, right? But
Mm,
beyond that, I didn't know where I wanted that to take me.
yeah.
We worked with fashion students as part of our like portfolio graduation program, right? So, the fashion kids, they made all the designs, and then we photographed it, and we had this big like show at the end, and that was amazing. And so I knew that I loved that aspect of it, but there was nothing tangible for me. And I think that's also why I didn't touch my camera for 2 years after I
Yeah.
graduated, because I wasn't inspired. I didn't know what I wanted to do. It felt forced to try to do anything else until I was ready. Um, and so, yeah, like weddings are just, like I said, they're just a good stepping stone
Yeah.
to find out what it is that you want to do, or what it is that you don't want to do. And that
Hmm.
was very clear for me the more I did weddings, of like, I'm not passionate about this, and it's not fair to my clients, because they need somebody who like lives, eats, breathes wedding
Yes.
photography, and that was just not me.
Yeah, absolutely. So now fast forwarding to you're doing boudoir, and now, I mean, you're operating as a coach and a photographer running your own business.
Mhm.
So from coming from a place of working for someone doing weddings to starting your business, can you take us back to like the early start of that business? What did that look like for you? Did you have that moment when, you fell in love with boudoir that you're like, okay, I have to do this on my own now?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was that journey like for you? Because I think the origins of anyone's entrepreneurship journey also are fascinating, and oftentimes come with so much fear, so much uncertainty, so much unexpected things. So can you share with us a little bit about what that looked like for you?
Yeah. So before I went out on my own with boudoir, I actually was a part of this national boudoir company. Because
Mhm.
at the time it was 2020. The world was shut down, and I knew I wanted to do boudoir, but boudoir is not just something you can pick up your camera and start doing. That is what I thought at the beginning, and that is not what I think anymore, because there's this almost fragility that comes with it,
Mhm.
because you are dealing with women who are in their lingerie or nude, and there's a lot of trauma handling that you have to be prepared to work with. It's delicate, right? It's raw, it's vulnerable. And so I had a photographer friend, who was interviewing for this national boudoir company, and so I was like, "Oh, I want to do that too." And so I did. I got the job, and the way their setup was, every week, if you wanted, you could do 2 weekends, you could do all 4 of the month. They would send you to a different city, and
Mm.
I went to Houston, and I had 4 days in a row of boudoir clients, from ranging from 4 clients a day to 8 clients a day. And so within 4 days, I think I shot 24 women within those first 4 days. And I had one training session with a local photographer before they sent me off. And so it felt very uncomfortable for me. It felt very, there was a lot of trust in me, which I didn't know if I necessarily deserved at that time, because I was so new to it. And that's just how they did it with their structure. And um, so I learned a lot about posing from this company, and they have a whole posing guide that they're very strict that you follow. And that for me was a red flag, because I'm like, it didn't give any um, leeway into the client's personality, which I think is a huge part of boudoir and their client experience. And so that to me was a red flag, because they wouldn't share any of those photos with the client for their image reveal. And I just quickly learned what I would want to do differently. And so I didn't work for this company for very long. And then I was just like, I'm going to go out on my own. I started recruiting friends of, let me practice on you. I would have them over at my house. I would put them in my bedroom, and we would just practice. I'd go to their house, whatever. But I just was so consumed with watching the female form and learning how to photograph her, and even just the subtle moments of sitting, or it doesn't always have to be this superposed pose, and it can just be something that's so natural and still very flattering and just representative of who they are, right? So yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. It sound as you were speaking, I was just thinking about this, like, because it sounds like you were kind of scrappy in some moments, like just taking initiative on your own end and figuring out what works for you,
Yeah.
because it was clear that what you were being taught and shown wasn't wasn't working, and so you took the initiative to do it your way, and I imagine like from there it kind of gently blossomed. You grew your fan base. Actually, I'm curious, like how that slowly garnered legs. Was it just from that initial, okay, I'm going to take initiative, I'm going to do this my way? You were practicing, with your friends, and then did the clients organically kind of come your way from referrals, or was it something that you realized, like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to take initiative to start marketing and really promote my services?
Honestly, it was a lot of word of mouth. It was
Mm.
because I at the time, I don't think I was utilizing Instagram very well or at all. So a lot of it was word of mouth, and these women, they would tell their friends about me, and a lot of it, and what I still hold true to this day, is the photos can be amazing. Anybody can take amazing photos. Like, I firmly believe that why the clients come back to you and why they refer their friends is how you made them feel and the experience that they had with you. And
Mhm.
that was something that I've heard from day one of just I create this very warm, welcoming space. And to me, that is the most important thing. It's the client experience, because I want them to feel so safe, so loved, so nurtured, and just so welcomed to show up authentically for themselves in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask to kind of like dive a little deeper on this, because you shared your journey leading up to photography, your personal life journey, which sounded very traumatic and very hard. And here you are now working with these women, supporting these women in this role of a coach. And so I imagine there had to be a lot that was going on behind the scenes, like professional career things aside, that was helping you step more into that role, embody that confidence, be more empowered. And I love how we got connected. It was actually through a mentorship group through Sam, our mutual coaches container, which was centered a lot around business, yes, but of course there's always the personal development side. So I want to ask, what has your journey been like with personal development specifically, and how have you found that supporting your business? Because I imagine there was probably a lot of that going on behind the scenes in order to, like, in a way, prepare you to be in this position now with what you're doing.
Yeah. I I love that they're very parallel with each other, because
Mm.
my business and my healing journey really didn't start until I moved to Denver 5 years ago. It was 5 years in June this summer. So we're in our 6th year, and it really they're both just growing next to each other and empowering both aspects, which I just think is this beautiful fluidity within each other, right? And I everything that I learn within my own healing, I bring into my experience. Now, before we start our sessions or before we start, looking at our images, we do a breathing technique. And even during the shoot, we do a breathing technique. And it's really just dropping into the body and out of the mind, right? Because we spend
Yeah.
so much time up there, we can get lost up there. And I think everything that I learn on my own and my own healing, like, only makes me stronger, and I just want to share that with my clients in my network. And I think it's a powerful thing, and I've honestly never thought of it this way until you asked that question, like how parallel they are with each other, because
Hmm.
one didn't happen without the other. I think they both happened at the same time, because that's just organically how it was created.
Yeah, yeah, 1000%. And I so agree with what you're sharing too, because as you were speaking, I'm thinking about my journey as well. And it's so interesting how, like, when I started my business, my first coach came into my life 5 months into my business. And sometimes I think like if I hadn't got in touch, or my coach actually, she cold DM'd me and I was like, who are you? Like, what is coaching? you know? But I think like if she had never DM'd me, or if I had never taken her up on her coaching, I'm sure I would have ventured into more personal development on my own or whatnot. But I think about how it supports and how it helped accelerate my journey in a way. And to your point about it working so much in parallel, yes, because I for myself also witnessed like as I'm up leveling in my life, here I am up leveling in my business. And in like simple tangible ways, that's like bringing in more income, that's booking higher caliber clients. And for, as I guess we can use like a tangible example, there's this concept of like confidence, right? Like me, when I look back on my last, I'll say like 29 years, because for the last two, I've really been working on this, but like 29 years, it's like there's that timid Evelina of like, okay, here I am leading with people pleasing or whatnot, but really tapping into that confidence. And feel like my business has been a vehicle for me to like really express that, because you have to set boundaries with money and clients, and you have to lead meetings and all that stuff. So I'm curious if you can speak to maybe any tangible, like particular skills, whether that was confidence, whether that was using your voice, whether that was, I mean, I think because of what you do is so body based, like if it's more tangible like that, like just embodiment practices, anything like that for you that's been, I'll say like maybe particularly important to both your personal development and your business.
Yeah. So my whole life, I've always been a confident person. I've always been a very vocal person,
Mm,
but it wasn't until the last 5 or 6 years, right, where it really became fine tuned because before it was just so loud and there was no focal point, there was no direction. And I think a lot of it was ego based because I was so deep in my eating disorder during my 20s. And so I think a lot of that confidence that I had before was accelerated because of the way people were speaking to me or approaching me because of my body, right?
mhm,
And but even as a kid, I was always the bigger kid, chubby kid, whatever. Um I still had this confidence, this presence about myself because you're so young, you don't know all the bullshit yet. So you're just like,
yeah,
I don't know why you're being mean to me. I'm still gonna have a great time.
that's
And that, I lived my life by that. And I was always someone who would stand up for people, would stand up for myself, even as a young kid. My sister was super shy when we were young, so I ended up speaking for her a lot. And I think those two things have always helped me within my journey. And when I kind of cleared the fog, right, of everything going on, I'm realizing that, my confidence and my voice were almost a crutch to hide behind, right? And not
mm,
really focus or journey deeper, right? And like actually listen to what my inner world is saying. And so now I find that it's less ego based and more soul based, right? And I'm leading from confidence because I just know that I'm the shit. And it's not because of outward approval or expression, right? It's not from outward validation. It's just that it's just this inner knowing within myself. And now I use my voice to help share that with other women, that you don't need to constantly be chasing this from other people, from men, from the opposite sex, from a partnership, whatever it is. It's within you already.
yeah.
So yeah, you know you said someone asked for some like embodiment
Yeah,
things.
if embodiment has maybe been one of those tools also that
Yeah.
you've leveraged, both I imagine like from a personal life, and because especially what you do, boudoir,
Mhm.
it's all about the embodiment. So if that's been maybe a player in your journey as well.
Not until recently, honestly. This last, especially maybe 6 months, is really when I've started tapping into that. Because I think there were steps before that needed to happen, right? And now that I firmly have this trust within myself and this inner knowing, I can lean into the embodiment a little bit more and the empowerment a little bit more. And what that looks like is exploring my sensuality and
Mhm.
really just allowing myself to play in those moments and
Yeah.
move my body a little bit more, and um just kind of fuse this connection with my physical form, right?
Yeah. And maybe just to back up, because I'm curious for people listening, if people are like, what is embodiment? I feel like I recently in the last year, like this word came on my radar and I'm like, what does that mean? And it was with working with Sam that she's like, get in your body, get out of your head. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like it was such a novel concept. So can you talk a little bit about what that actually means? If there's people listening, they're like, I don't really know what embodiment entails.
So the way I look at it, there's embodiment and there's empowerment. And to me, embodiment is the physicality of your power and of your soul, your essence, your eros, right? And then the empowerment part is how you show up for yourself and how you project outwards into
Mm,
the world, right? So embodying is dropping into the body, as Sam said, and it's just giving yourself joyful movement. It's, a lot of it is sensual. So you really have to lean into your senses, take slower bites when you're eating and enjoy the food in your mouth. Nourish your body with movement that feels good, not movement because for the sake of movement because you think you have to do it. It's listening to what feels good and is activating for you, not going to a hit program if that's not what you're feeling, right? Maybe it's a deep yoga stretch, and listening to music that entices you he arouses you, and it's just leaning into those senses and allowing yourself to receive and feel and show up with exactly how you want to show up.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that, especially embracing the senses, because that, like, us as humans, that's how we take in the world. And what I've noticed for myself in the last year is how much, of course, consciously, but I think because once the idea kind of landed for me and I embraced it, now it's become a little bit like, okay, I'm living this now. It feels more intuitive where I don't have to think about it. And I think about, me post college, I got very addicted to exercise
Mm-hmm.
and food, but in a way of like controlling my food. Like I need to weigh and measure and count my calories, and I had to go to the gym every single day. And I was on this like regimen. And it wasn't because I wasn't necessarily, trying to change my body or anything. It was more so about this feeling of control because there were so many things in my life that were out of control. I hated my job. I wasn't
Mm.
satisfied in my relationship. So this like control through working out and food felt so empowering, granted air quotes empowering, because it was a false sense of empowerment that I was giving myself in the moment. Where now, especially having like just integrated that concept, I'm so able to like more quickly notice like, okay, if I'm not feeling this, I don't have to do this.
Mm.
And tuning into what actually feels good and like savoring that a little bit deeper. So like for example, in the morning I have a yoga practice. Every day I have to wake up and do like 10 to 15 minutes of just a quick yoga flow because it helps me wake up, and it just like sets such a good tone. And I'm not approaching it from a place like I have to do this because I have to work out, and like that is not where my mind is going. It's like it actually feels like so good, and I'm tuning into how my body is stretching and feeling. And again, it's kind of wild because it's become second nature for me now, but a couple years ago this was such a foreign concept. So just it's wild. And
Yeah.
um I think speaks to once we kind of get a grip on and an idea and how we start to integrate it, how just it becomes second nature and so beautiful for us to work in. I want to dive a little bit deeper on what you mentioned with working on your clients particularly, and this weaves in a little bit with the embodiment and just you know working with your clients, seeing them in this very vulnerable state. um, in a service-based industry, I feel like because we're working with other people, there's always things that we take away from them. And I
Mm.
imagine in something like what you're doing, where it's very vulnerable it's very intimate, it's very open. Women are posing in their lingerie, they're nude, all of these things. I'm curious, what are some things that you've taken away from your clients? Whether it's been lessons, or you mentioned that working with your clients has helped you on your healing journey in itself. So I'm curious if you could speak to any maybe more particular instances of how that helped you.
That's a good question. I think it just gives me permission to fucking do it.
Yes.
Really, like when, that inner critic comes up, right? And she has all this to say, I can look back and say, well, no, because all of these women have done this. Like particularly when I'm working through my own things with my own body issues, because we're human, we all have them, right? And I can have this thought of don't post this picture because you look XYZ, but then it's like, I look exactly how these women look, and they look fucking phenomenal. And so it's this guidance from them to know
Mm,
that it's safe, to know that there is this, like I said, this web, like I said earlier, this web of women, their power, their strength, their magnetism supporting you behind that. And so I'm creating this community of women who I know will always support me. And I think that has helped tremendously. And it's just this guiding force for me to continue to do what I'm doing, because I have all of these amazing women behind me supporting me, and it's just this sisterhood. Every time I post something where it's vulnerable, or I'm posting a vulnerable picture, whatever it is, I have so many former clients and just people in my DMs flooding, telling me how amazing I look, how strong I am, how inspiring I am, all of these things. And so for me, that's everything that I could ever need.
mm, I love that so much. It's like, yeah, it's a very, I mean, I don't even know if this is the right word, but like the word that's coming to me is like symbiotic. Like you guys are both supporting each other, you know? I think that's the right scientific word, symbiotic relationship.
It's not just a one-way thing, right? Where
Right.
I'm hyping up my clients, or I'm doing all of this for them. Like they do so
Mhm.
much for me in return, and
Yeah.
it's this forever relationship that we can rely on. And I have clients from 2 years ago that still pop in my DMs, and they're going through a bad body image day or whatever, and like they just need a pep talk or someone
Yeah.
to say that they've got it. I'm like, girl, I got you.
Yeah.
And so it's just a beautiful connection.
And I imagine that was probably something unexpected that came up, because I can't see like you going into this thinking like, oh, I'm going to get this from my clients.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I
Yeah.
think, no, go
Oh, go
ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm not trying to think back to when I went into boudoir. Like, what were my initial thoughts? I just wanted to help women feel amazing, right?
Yeah.
The reminding women of their power thing came later. I just wanted, because for me, when I first started boudoir, it was very much focused on body image and helping women. What I said at the time was unfuck themselves from diet culture and just today's media, right? And all of these societal expectations that we're expected to uphold, whatever. And so at that time, and I still hold true to this, but it's it's been refined and we've grown from it. But at the time, it was just accepting who you are and your body image, right? And getting you from a place of body negativity to body positivity, right? And that was my primary goal. Now it's so much bigger than that, and it's just grown into this beautiful thing that at the time it wasn't even on my radar.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I'm thinking, the unexpected, I guess, perks and things that come out of you just showing up and leading from that place of purpose. Like you go into something with your own intention and it's to help other people, but to the point of it being such a, again, to use that word like symbiotic, like they're giving back to you. And that's essentially what my question was kind of getting at, was like, I'm sure you never kind of expected that you were going to derive this from them, that they were going to kind of help you navigate that journey for yourself. And I think too, because I experienced that in my own business. I started just loving branding and wanting to help my clients, but then out of nowhere, I'm learning so much from them that
Mhm.
I never expected. And of course, there comes their feedback and their sentiments that kind of keep me going. But I think that's, at least for me, it's been fuel for the fire to
Yeah.
keep going. Because when we were chatting before we pressed the record, there's ups and downs in business all the time. Like, it takes some serious shit and resiliency to do this, like to run your own business, to manage all the things.
Mhm.
And so in those moments, at least for me, um, where the doubts come in, where the low days, it's coming back to that feedback. And that was actually something that didn't occur to me when we were chatting before we pressed the chords. Like, looking back at the testimonials, like coming back to your clients and anchoring into like, fuck, like I'm changing lives, I'm supporting
Yeah.
women. Yeah.
Changing lives, but also changing my own life. Never did I think when I started this boudoir journey that it would help me heal my eating disorder. But at
Mm,
some point, it became so apparent to me as I'm witnessing these women in their strength, in their truth, showing up. It felt very inauthentic for me to continue what I was doing and how I was harming myself while also projecting this message of self-love and body positivity or body acceptance,
mm,
right? And so that just it just so naturally happened because I can't, it felt like a double life, right? And
yeah.
so it just was so beautiful and organic how that happened. And so, I say my clients helped heal me. They
Hmm.
helped me heal myself.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love
Mhm.
that. I love that so much. I want to dive into my three last little closing questions that I love to ask
Mhm.
guests at the close of the episode. Number one is, what would you say to someone who has a burning desire on their heart to start a personal project or a venture, or maybe it is start their own business, but they are sitting with a lot of doubt or fear and uncertainty?
Rip the Band-Aid off. Do
Yes.
it. You just have to do it. You have to take that leap because it's terrifying, but in the best way. And,
Mm,
we were talking previously or before we hit record, and I've recently had a low moment in my business, and so I allowed myself to sit in it. There's no but. I allowed myself to sit in it for 2 days, and I had all the feelings of, I wanna quit, what is my purpose? What am I doing? Like, questioning everything, right? And then I woke up today, and I'm just like, "You're still kicking ass. You're still doing it." And so, there's going to be hard moments, but you can't let the unknown of what's gonna happen stop you from taking that next step because it's so rewarding. I would never want anything different for my life. I still have, yes, I had a low moment, but I still have so many amazing things happening. I'm on a podcast with you. I have a podcast interview for my own podcast later today. I'm launching 2 events coming up. Like, there's
yes.
the beauty outweighs the bad.
Mm.
That's like, you just have to do it.
Yeah, and I love your outlook on that too. It's seeing things from that light, especially in those low moments, because of course you could look at lows and think, "Ah, fuck, like this is, I've had a low month, or this client canceled, or whatever it is." But anchoring into the gratitude and the good, like what you're saying, is so important. And of course, like in these moments, it's difficult to do, but taking it day by day, of
Mhm.
course, if you're feeling the suck, feel the suck and then move on, like process
Right.
those feelings and keep going. I love the expression, choose your heart.
Mm.
Because, either way you look at it, like, life is hard, and you could either do the hard thing of being unfulfilled and doing the same thing every day, or like sitting with like, oh, if only, or I wish, or doing it, going through that hard and allowing yourself to maybe be surprised, because you
Yeah.
never know what's going to happen.
I have friends who are just so miserable in their jobs, but it's a consistent paycheck. And
Mhm.
I'm over here like, I would never want that. I don't want that for myself. And I'm so happy that I chose me and what I want. And it's like you said, your core value is freedom. That's also one of mine. And it's just this permission to make our own rules, right? And it's a big thing I will say is have community, because
Yeah.
this is isolating.
Yes.
It's there are moments where I feel so alone, but I know that I'm not, because I have people like you. I have people that I've connected with through this avenue of my business that I can turn on and lean on and support each other with, because I know that they're also either going through it, or they have been through it, or they're going to be going through it. And it's having that sense of community, because otherwise it can feel so alienating.
Yes, 1000%. I agree with this wholeheartedly. I had a moment last month that it was like a little bit of a light bulb moment for me in conversation with my two roommates here, because I'm currently in Spain doing a like digital nomadic opportunity. And it was my friend Caroline who I traveled with here, and then our roommate who like just a friend for life and a woman like on our caliber, like business owner, go getter, like very expansive. We were out for drinks and we were just chatting about our goals for life, business, all that. And I noticed as we were all talking, we were talking about like reaching like $1 million milestones. And we were all saying like when we reach our $1 million milestones, not if, like it wasn't a question of whether or not we're going to do it. It's like we're doing it. It's like, it's just a matter of when. And I
Mm-hmm.
paused and I was like, guys, I'm like, can I just say how much I appreciate the fact that we are all speaking from this place of like certainty about the potential of our lives. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like oftentimes, or at least, you know, there's a lot of people in my life who don't see beyond their predicament. It's like, this is just what it is. And I mean, truthfully, I was in that place for a long time because I didn't even know the potential of what exists. Like,
Yeah.
if you start your own business, there's no ceiling. Like, you can keep going. And I think immersing myself in communities and circles, it's been so like expansive is that word.
Yeah.
Like, because you keep seeing the possibility and the potential. So I just wanted to share that because that came top of mind as you were talking, in that like the community piece is huge. It's like witnessing other people do things that you want to do is going to be the thing that's going to propel you or definitely help you on
Yeah.
that journey.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. My next question is around purpose. I feel deeply in my core that you are such a purpose driven human. I think your journey, especially your story, speaks a lot around how you've connected to leaning in and leading with purpose in your work. But I'm curious, when you hear that word, what that means to you. Like, what does purpose mean? And would you say you're currently living out your purpose?
Mm. Yeah, I am.
Yes.
I had a friend recently, she asked me, and I can't remember if you and I touched on this in my podcast, but I was talking to her. I had a podcast interview. I had a boudoir session that week. I had so many hats happening at the same time, which is a daily thing, right? But she just asked me, she goes, okay, so you have your podcast, you have your coaching, you have your boudoir, you have everything that happens behind the scenes, the editing, the scheduling, contracts, all of the things. How do you juggle it all? Like, how do you
Hmm.
not get overwhelmed? And I thought about that and I said, well, it all feeds into the same purpose. You know, they're different things, yes, but it all is feeding into this higher vision of coming back to power, just helping women reclaim that power within themselves that they either lost or didn't fully realize that they had or whatever. And so to me, it's not overwhelming and I'm not getting burnt out because I just so thoroughly enjoy everything that I'm doing. Every outlet that I have, it just feeds into this bigger vision, this bigger purpose. And so for me, that is so purposeful. And um when I hear that word, it just makes me think, like, the first word that comes to mind is comfort.
Hmm.
And just this feeling that I've got myself, because I know who I am. I know what my mission is. You know, going back to that low moment that you and I were talking about that I recently had, that sucked, right? No, it sucked. But the vision is so much bigger than that. And so it's not going to stop me. That's a speed bump, a little pothole in the road, but I know there's so much more for me to give, and that doesn't define me. And so purpose is just, it's a huge driving factor because I know where I'm going.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you touched on the everything being interconnected with what you
Mhm.
do, because it's interesting. When I think about both your photography and your coaching, there's so many people in my life that I know that are just photographers or are just coaches. And what's to say that it can't be both? And it's obvious to me, but maybe for people listening, they're like, oh, well, what is like, how does these two mesh together and all that? But it's clear to me that your mission, your purpose is the connecting force, like you said, between both. And I love that. And I think it's so expansive too, because it just goes to show that if you're tuned into what it is that drives you, the way, like the vehicle for which you do it can look so many different ways. And I
Yeah.
don't doubt, Jordan, that like, who knows, maybe in a couple of years, there's going to be a new outlet or something like that. Like the growth is like the ball's going to keep rolling. The growth is
Mhm.
going to keep happening. And I think it's so beautiful that you've anchored into this driver for you. And you are, I mean, like you said, like full freedom, like there's no ceiling, like you're giving yourself the
Yeah.
space to have it look so many different ways, but so long as it connects to that piece of empowerment and embodiment, like you mentioned, like it's all feeding into the same exact thing.
Yeah. And your top value is freedom, and that's also one of mine, but my top value is connection, because for
Mm,
so long I was disconnected from
yeah.
myself, from others, and it goes back to that relationship that I was in of, there was no communication, there was no trust. And so for me, and this is something I've only recently realized in the last maybe year, is how important connection is to me. And so these outlets are just different ways and avenues for me to connect with people
Mm,
and continue to spread my message. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing. And for me, that's not overwhelming. I'm a manifesting generator. I think you are too. I always
yeah.
have my hands in little pots, so it just comes so natural for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember like having discovered that and learning. So for people listening, they're like, what is manifesting generator? Human design. They
Mhm.
can look it up, but it's basically a modality that similar but different than astrology, helps you connect with essentially your like profile of like who you are. And it outlines all these different facets and elements and the major types that there are, manifesting generator being one of them. One of our superpowers is being okay and it being our superpower to do so many things at once and have
Yeah.
so many interests. And I
Mhm.
remember when I first discovered this and heard about this, I had been in a period of my life where I was trying to like pick a lane. Like this is when I was still in architecture and I was like, oh my God, I have to be an architect and like I can't do this. But
Yeah.
discovering like, whoa, I could actually be so many things. It was like this permission that I didn't know that I needed to do all the things. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
And that's okay now. And I leverage that. I'm like, I actually am not just a designer. Here I am being a podcaster. Who would have thought? But it's like celebrating all that.
We're told to niche down or as you said, pick a lane. It's like, I'm going to do all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Why
Actually.
not?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's our superpower.
It is, yeah, and it just comes so easily for us. It's just fluid.
Yes.
And that's how, when my friend asked me how I juggle it all, it's because I love it. It's
Hmm.
easy for me. It's just so natural. And
Yeah.
they all just, yeah, they intertwine.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, my last question for you, Jordan. Because my brand is all about the home
Mm,
and all things, nostalgia and comfort. Of course, home is a very subjective word. It can mean anything to anyone. But I'm curious. Everyone has their own associations, but when you hear the word home, what comes to mind? Or do you have a favorite memory of home when you think of
mm.
that word?
That just gave me chills. Um, Home for me is a feeling and not necessarily a place. When I was 15, we moved from, Las Vegas, Nevada to small town South Dakota. When I was 19, I moved to Minneapolis for 8 years. Now I'm in Denver. And I don't know if I would say I have a home base. And for me, home is community, and home is this feeling of spaciousness and welcoming, and it's just warm. And so to me, it's the people that I have in my life, because I know that when I'm with those people who just love me unconditionally, who accept me for who I am, who support me in everything that I do, that's home for me, because it's just so authentic and pure and loving.
So good. And what a beautiful way too that through your work, it's like in a way you're able to cultivate more of that home by building your community through the women that you're working with and all of that. So it's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. This was such a joy. Can you share with people how they can find you, how they can work with you, plug yourself?
Yeah. On any social, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, I mostly hang out on Instagram. The username is It's Jordan Hutchison, Hutchison. Everyone always wants to add in N after the I. That does not exist.
Amazing. And I'll link everything in the show notes. But thank you so, so much, Jordan.
Thank you. This was so good.
Hi again, it's me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you were able to garner some takeaways and nuggets for your personal home journey. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world if you left a rating and review. And if you'd like to connect deeper, find me at Studio Dumka on Instagram, where I share content on all things home, of course. Sending a big, cozy, homey hug your way, friends. Till next time.